I Wish You All the Best tells the story of a non-binary teen and their struggles to overcome a host of challenges and start a happier new life. Here to tell us about it, director Tommy Dorfman and actors Corey Fogelmanis and Cole Sprouse. Welcome to the South by Southwest Studio, y'all.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Now, honestly, I gotta tip my hat, if I had it, to you, because this is your directorial debut.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank
you also
you.
wrote the film as well.
I did. Yes, thank you.
Oh my gosh. So, like, I Wish You All the Best is based off of a novel, a young adult novel. What was it that drew you to the story?
Mason Deaver's novel was so unique at the time and still remains that way. It's really an outlier in the YA space. And for me, it was a beacon of hope. Like, as a trans person reading the book back in 2019, I, for the first time, saw myself reflected, my emotions reflected and validated through the book and through Ben specifically. I also grew up in the South where the movie takes place. So for a lot of reasons, I was drawn into the story, and I think the world that Mason created was a wellspring for me as a filmmaker, because I could really pick and choose different characters that I wanted to lean into, things that maybe don't work as well in an adaptation, and they were just so incredible as a collaborator, really gave me agency to be a filmmaker, which I think is not always the case when you're doing adaptations, so I'm really grateful to them. I'm excited because I think they just landed in Austin like a few minutes ago, so they'll be here.
They're in the building.
They're in the building, and it just felt like the right first film for me.
Yeah, that's great. Well, question to all of you, like, what do you hope people will take away from seeing this film, and what sorts of new ground are you breaking?
Come on.
Yeah, I hope people feel affirmed by it, and I hope people feel inspired to reach out to each other and see each other and be curious about each other and hold each other, honestly.
Right.
Yeah.
I like that, hold each other.
Yeah.
You know, that's really good. I'm gonna keep it on you, so I'm not gonna move on to the next person. So get used to it. I like how they both looked at you, and now you're in the hot seat. Can you tell us about the story and like exactly what drew you to your character? Yeah.
The story is one of learning to not hide yourself from yourself and the world. And Ben starts in a very different place than they end up. And that was really exciting to me because I felt like it was the first time that I was really able to go on a journey as a character. And I was just so excited to work with Tommy. I felt like she was the perfect person to make this movie. And I had so much confidence going into it because of you. It was my first time like leading a movie, so I was obviously very nervous because when I haven't done something before, I have no idea what to expect. And it just couldn't have been better.
Yeah, I feel like the movie in so many ways is about like what honesty can give you and like what honesty nourishes with yourself and with others, and like even collaborating with all the actors on the film, like being really honest about this being my first film, or Corey being really honest about it's Corey's first time leading a film, meant that we didn't go in performing any version of ourselves to try and prove our worth in some way. We actually could just show up with a little bit of naivete and earnestness, which in turn I think it really seeps through the film. Like there's kind of just like a really earnest quality to it.
Right, you're learning something new together, and
yeah,
it just feels like, okay, nobody's better than anybody here. We're just all trying to create
and we became like a little chosen family. It was very cute.
That's great. Okay, Cole, you're out the hot seat now, Corey. Don't worry, like, you can breathe a sigh of relief now. So, like, I always find it interesting when there's relationships in film between like unlikely characters, right? Like you're the husband of Ben's sister, right? So it's like just a step removed that it makes it interesting enough. So can you talk to me about your character? Like, what do you see in him, and what drew you to that character?
I mean, the thing that drew me to the character after Tommy and I had discussed it was that I think it's really important for representation, especially in a movie like this, to have a kind of straight ally that seems almost unlikely but is also learning at the same time. I love the character because, and in my favorite scene in the movie, he's the first to admit that he's coming to terms with learning how to navigate the same world in a way that is respectful and conscious, but also adaptable. And I think that's a really beautiful dynamic. He's a young father, so I think the character is learning how to all of a sudden elevate something else within his life as the kind of protagonist of his life, and he has to do that with his child, but also with Ben. He's a teacher, and it was just an older role. It was an exciting thing to take, and Tommy and I have known each other for years, so it was really awesome to see her command the set in a way that this was really inspiring.
Yeah, yeah. And personally, getting used to seeing you in an older role is very refreshing, you know, because obviously you basically grown up with you, like, you know, around.
Yeah, I can't do the high school stuff anymore.
Yeah, of course, no, exactly.
I mean,
Or
look,
the elementary school.
yeah,
or the
physically,
school.
I would beat that dead cash cow until it was completely gone, but I just can't physically do it anymore.
Right. If you're gonna be a school, you're gonna be teaching.
Yeah, exactly. I'm still there, baby.
There is this kind of, I'm realizing as we sit here, and I guess I knew this going into it, but there is kind of a uniting force between the three of us in which, like, we've all acted in teen shows, like Corey and Cole both grew up in Disneyland, like in child actor land, and then to think, you know, I don't know, when I first met Cole 7 years ago, however long ago, I could never have imagined that we'd be sitting here at South by Southwest, like premiering a film that, while it is in the YA space, is really a family film. It's really like a universal film, audience-wise, and doesn't, perhaps, I don't know, I think I've learned from my tropes having acted in these types of things, and like how to navigate that as a storyteller, as an adult, is really exciting to me, and to do that with two people who, I don't know, haven't played this type of role in this type of project before is so exciting.
That's great. And you're breaking new ground while you're doing it too.
Yes,
You're
I think
doing it together.
I think we are definitely breaking new ground with this film. Yeah, which is exciting.
How do you feel about like the state of queer roles in films today? Like, are we making any progress? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I really don't think we are making that much progress.
Explain.
Frankly.
Yeah. Let's get frank.
Let me be really blunt with you. No, I think.
You almost made me spit up.
I think it's sorry. Yeah, I think it's it's been long days of press, so I've gotten to the point where the filter might be gone. But I would say that peaks and valleys, things come in seasons. I think there were a few years in which queer representation felt really present, a specific kind of queer representation in TV, with Pose, or, you know, when Looking was on the air. Like, there's sort of these like pockets that you can look at, the L Word, I grew up with Queer as Folk, a lot of television. And then there's, of course, the film and TV side, but the film side rather, and in cinema. And yes, there is queer representation. It obviously exists, but I think it's very few and far between, and often those roles are relegated to cis queer men and women, and it's very rare to have a trans lead in a film, especially in this genre. So that feels really exciting to me. I think it's one of the reasons that I became a filmmaker, is not just to tell queer and trans stories, but to widen our understanding of humanity, because queer people are students, they're doctors, they're lawyers. You know, they're not trends. We're not trends or tropes, and often we are categorized as such in media. So I do find I have a bit of a responsibility as a storyteller and an artist to expand our ideas of, you know, what queer and trans people look like, sound like, how they exist, how they navigate spaces, how they navigate rural places like North Carolina versus coastal cities like New York. And, you know, as an actor, I can tell you firsthand, like, there aren't many roles that come my way that are specific to that experience, which is also okay, because I think, you know, it is on studios to believe that you could cast a trans girl in a role that wasn't necessarily written for a trans person, that you could cast a queer person as a love interest in a bigger budget film. Like, I think there's a lot of work to be done, but it's exciting to be part of this next generation of filmmakers. You know, I just saw Jane Schoenberg's film last night at the Paramount, which, like, I'm so inspired by Jane and their work as a director and as a filmmaker and as a creative, and we work in very different styles and very different mediums, but it's people like that that give me hope, you know, and I hope that this film can open doors and inspire the next generation of queer filmmakers.
That's great. Speaking of, like, you know, queer, trans, like all these people not being trends, I feel like, you know, we just had the cast of Star Trek Discovery in here. And
Sure, oh my God.
You know, they're breaking new ground because they had like the first non-binary characters to
Yeah.
ever be like on like a fleet, which is incredible. And, you know, and you come in here like flaunting your movie saying like, yo, we're in here as well. So like, it's great to see that happening. But as far as like, you know, to make sure that it's not a trend, I think we should have characters that are like more long-standing, those like recurring characters that are like staples in pop culture, like a
Yeah.
James Bond,
Oh my
you know what I'm
God.
saying, like John Wick. So my
Listen.
question to all of you is, do you think at some point we will see a queer James Bond or John Wick?
I would love to see it. That would be really hot.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to see Kristen Stewart, Jane Bond.
I would love that. I would love that.
Die for that moment.
Yes.
But I absolutely think so. I don't see why not. I think we can't just be limited to being queer people telling like very queer specific stories. I think that studios and people in Hollywood who are willing to take that risk will see the reward. The problem is they just haven't seen it before because it's never been done.
Right.
So there's a fear in that, and I understand that. It's been done very safely, and you see how that doesn't necessarily translate either. So I think it's on, you know, there are very few, if any, trans executives in Hollywood, and you know, to be industry about it, like I can name one off the top of my head, maybe. Yeah, like with really not a lot of decision makers, if you will, who have this experience. So of course they don't think there's an audience for it. But I'm here to tell you that like 1 in 5 Gen Z kids identify somewhere on the LGBTQIA spectrum. And that is growing exponentially with Gen Alpha. So it would be really silly of you to not reflect that in your movies and not believe that there's an audience for that.
Right. Well, what you said about executives, I'm gonna just throw my hat in the ring for Tommy Dorfman to be an executive one day.
Oh my goodness. Listen, I would say, I mean, I love producing. I produce this film. I'm producing other films. I have a production company called Down the Line, and I really do focus on varied, you know, stories. But I think I would hate to be an executive. I'll play an executive, but my goodness.
But you're inspiring the people who one day would
we
want
have
to.
You have to.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have to speak it.
By doing what you do, you're leading the next generation, which is incredible. All right, so for Corey and Cole, when it comes to like your roles and like for future people watching this film, let's take it back. Do you think that this film is something that a younger version of you would have benefited from watching, and why?
I think absolutely. I think younger Corey isolated himself a lot, and what I learned through this and just in talking about it with Tommy is that you just can't do it alone. And so I think being on the lookout for people that you feel safe with and can be safe for is something that I would have liked to just have seen represented.
Right.
Yeah.
I think so. I think what this movie does really well is touch upon the kind of universal teenage coming-of-age experiences within identity politics as well. And I think you know, when I was a teen, when most of us were teens and we start to get a little self-conscious and maybe a bit more introspective, these kind of films are really healthy and important because it shows a kind of broader scope of that experience in a way that makes you feel less alone, regardless of how you choose to identify. And I think I probably would have loved this movie.
Right. Okay.
And I think it's really important to acknowledge, like, I grew up with really good teen movies, and I found myself in Julia Stiles' character in 10 Things I Hate About You. I found myself in Molly's character, you know, in all the John Hughes films. I found myself, even though I didn't see my exact self represented, even though there weren't necessarily queer people in those films.
That could have been
so
someone like
it would be
you.
a disservice to you as like a cis straight person to not see this movie because you think for some reason you could never relate. Like it's very human.
Very universal.
Coming of age is very universal, and identity plays a small role in that, but we all have identities that we feel beholden to, that we feel strapped to, that we feel imprisoned to in some way. And so I think it's really good to expand the point of view that we're seeing experiences through, because then there is an opportunity to find new parts about yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's get like inside the movie, but also outside the movie, right? So Ben has a great support system, like teacher, sister, boss. But a lot of trans people, when they come out, they don't have that support system. Can you speak to a little bit of what is the reality of what happens?
I can. I am on the board at the Ali Forney Center, which is a nonprofit based in New York City that services LGBTQ youth suffering from homelessness. And only about 50% of the clients come from the tri-state area. The rest come from other states and countries around the world. So they do a lot of work in helping harbor safe environments for queer and trans youth specifically. So yes, we are living in a world in which there are a significantly higher number of homeless queer youth than non-queer youth, percentage-wise. We have higher rates of suicide and suicidal ideation. So the realities of being queer and trans in America is very, very complicated. I'll keep it here because we are here. And Texas is obviously a hotbed of this, right? A lot of anti-trans legislation being bred in Texas and inspiring other states to do the same. So I think, you know, what I didn't want to make was trauma porn.
Of course.
What I didn't want to make was a film that glorified those aspects of it. The inciting incident of my film, yes, is very real, right?
Yeah.
A kid gets kicked out of their parents' house for coming out in rural North Carolina. This happens all the time.
It's not
probably happening right now. Yeah, it's not something you can avoid, and it would be a disservice to not investigate that. But my interests lie in the pathway that offers the most safety, security, and affirmation for all involved. So for me, I really made a focused effort to show what a version of this could look like. If you happen to have a sister who lived 2 hours away who could get there and pick you up, maybe you haven't spoken in 10 years, but you have her phone number and you take the gamble and she comes. If you get dropped into a beacon like Raleigh, which offers a safe space in a state like North Carolina that is more liberal, that is more, not even liberal, that just is more accepting, I would say, of varied identities, what your life could look like in that space. If you fall in love with somebody who loves you regardless of your gender identity, like who loves you because of the human being that you are, if you build friends and community, what that could look like, right? And I think a big lesson in this movie is to let people be good. So rarely do we trust that people could be good. I mean, as a trans person in Texas, like I had my own fears about coming down here. I was like, I haven't been to Texas in a while. And especially not since all of this new legislation has passed. So I had my own insecurities about that, but ultimately I also have to believe that there are good people everywhere. Good people in Texas, good people in North Carolina, good people in Georgia where I grew up. So that was kind of it for me. You know, I wanted to see how, like, if you lead with love, and even Ben's parents, who are in many ways the sort of villains of this story, are not the villains. Like they're doing the best that they can do, and then and eventually they do lead with love. And maybe that doesn't look like we're a happy family wrapped up in a bow, but it looks like doing what's best for your kid, which is sometimes to let them go.
It's the real. You know, it's what happens. So this is a question for everyone, for like aspiring actors and advocates, particularly those in the LGBTQ community.
Slay.
So what advice, I'm sorry?
I said slay.
I was like, I wanted to say it again so we can zoom in when you say
Queer people. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
It's
I love it.
contagious. I'm kidding.
I love it. I love the, see, this is good. This is, I feel it. But what advice would you offer like those people in terms of like navigating the industry, finding their voice, and just contributing to positive change?
Yeah, I feel like I've talked a lot to you guys when I speak to that. Cole, you should probably speak.
Yeah, you
to
chilling
that
a little too hard.
How
man.
queer people can. I'm just kidding.
Is it my turn? This is my time.
Yeah, this is definitely a question for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think do what you can to trust yourself. And I think what makes an actor or any artist compelling is having a point of view, and that's a really hard thing, I think, to foster, but I think it's the most important thing, and so that's surrounding yourself with people who love you and believe in you and challenge you, and just don't give up.
Yeah, I think Hollywood, as does every industry, exists within binaries, right? Exists within like boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back, right?
Yeah.
And I think for many years when I was first auditioning, I felt like I had to prove that I could be something more than my role on 13 Reasons Why, like, you know, breakdown bitchy gay, whatever you want to call it. Like, so I felt like I needed to prove like, oh, I could play like this straight guy, like I could do all these different things, and I can, like I'm a very varied actor, right? Like I can play very different types of characters, but if my only effort is to like fit in, if I'm doing that to fit into somebody else's narrative so explicitly, I'm doing myself a disservice and therefore like my craft a disservice. So I would just say like, honor what makes you unique, right? And queer and trans people are very unique. Lean into that and don't waste time convincing people of your worth. Like, go where the water is warm, especially if you don't fit into whatever that status quo is, regardless of what industry you work in. Like, find friends and fans along the way. And then I think there's a lot of work allies can do to support queer and trans people and any diverse person coming into our space, right? I think, like, whether it's, you know, attaching to something to help get a movie made because, like, you can push that over the line in a way that's really meaningful. Whether it's, and also because you see the value in the story that we're telling, whether it's like handing off a role to a different actor that maybe you think makes more sense for that role, or like, or it's calling in friends. Like, I just met with this actress for my next film, and there's a non-binary character, and like, she's a big star, and she was like, you know, my friend is so talented, they're non-binary, we grew up together, like, would you ever consider meeting with them, right? And it's just, it's being like, I actually have friends that are amazing and I have access now. Let me put you in this place. And like, this kid auditioned and they were incredible. And I was like, I would never have met that person because they're not with CAA or they're not with IC, like whatever, well, ICM owns CAA, so it's all the same hellscape. But I think they're not with whatever like agents, they don't have the access points, right? So I think as much as possible, like, believe in yourself. No, but it's true. Like, you kind of have to. Like, you do.
I think speaking of access point, like, I think you bring up something really important, which is reach out to the people you enjoy. I've not known a single creative person that doesn't enjoy, if you can get an email or even on Instagram or anything like that, just showing the love and being like, hey, I really resonated with this. Just want to let you know that. Is there any way we can have a coffee or a Zoom or whatever that is? Like, that goes so far. And, you know, the longer you get to know our industry specifically, the more you realize you're going to end up seeing the same faces over and over and over and over again. Like, the community is actually smaller than it is perceived from the outside. And that sort of stuff goes a really long way. Reaching out, just showing love and saying, hey, and hi, I'm blah, blah, blah. I'd love to meet for a coffee or something is awesome.
I think so much can happen in the DMs. It's true.
I professionally slid in many a DMs and it worked out great.
No, it's like people are really afraid to ask for help. But you actually absolutely have to in order to find success, regardless of where you're at in your journey as an artist. I think it is essential to do that and also give people a chance.
More of the story, slide in those DMs, y'all. It works. It works. I think that's a great place to end it here. Thank you so much for stopping by the studio.
Thank you so much. It's just such a treat. Knocking that mic for y'all.
No, absolutely.
Really great questions. Really great interview.